Welcome back to Unsolicited Advice from Toxic Bubblegum. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
And today we're talking about opening lines.
Yeah, we thought this. I thought this would be a fun thing to do. Because it's summer, the weather's nice.
It's the opening of summer, if you will.
Oh. That being said, I'm very cold.
Yeah, it's really cold in here because we're in the shade.
But we're gonna have a nice fun time anyway.
It's gonna be good.
So our opening quote, our opening line.
It's not our opening line. We already introduced it.
Yeah. An opening line should invite the reader to begin the story. It should say, "Listen, come in here. You want to know about this."
And that's by Stephen King, who is, I guess, a pretty popular author or something like that.
I should probably wait to get into this, but I just want to point out that for as much as he talks about opening lines, the first line to Misery is, "Oh." I'm not making this up.
God, it's so funny. Don't you want to know about it, though? Are you not intrigued?
It's one of his best books, but I was not intrigued by the opening line, actually.
Whoops.
Not the opening line. The opening chapter is just, oh.
Ouch. That's a rough one, Stephen King.
So.
Well then.
But anyway.
So I guess that swings us right into part one, which is the importance or not of opening lines.
Opening lines... There's, like, a big debate going on. Going on right now.
Ooh.
It's timely. No. It's consistently going on. Like a lot of literary creative debates. It's one of those ongoing, there are just different sides to it kind of things. But there is a perpetual discussion going on in the literary world about how important an opening line actually is. So, because there are a lot of people that say that in the context of the story, if the story is good, it doesn't really matter how good the opening line is because people aren't going to remember opening lines verbatim, whereas some people say that the opening line is the line where you have to hook the reader, so it has to be, like, the best line of the whole thing, just about. So, our first discussion point, how important is the first line of a project?
I think I feel like it has to have some weight to it, as it turns out, like, because you have to, it is a thing where it's, like, it's the first thing people are gonna get when they open the book.
Yeah.
So, or whatever, or to watch the movie or whatever. So it's, like, I feel like it definitely has importance. Like, because you sort of have to set the mood right from the start.
Yeah.
Or you have to create a sense of intrigue.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be the immediate mood. Like, one of the things I was looking at opening lines for our later discussion, and I was looking at the opening line of Zootopia, and it's absolutely not the tone of the movie whatsoever, because it's setting up for a comedic build-off.
Right.
So it's like, those first few lines aren't, like, the most important in the whole thing, but they do sort of build up to what the rest of the movie is going to be.
Yeah.
Like, it establishes context. So I feel like it does have, it might not be the most important thing you're going to do with your book, but it does have to carry weight.
What I found, where I personally land on it, is that the first scene as a whole is a lot more important than the first line. Right. That being said, if you can have the best opening line and, like, you remember it, that first line will have a bigger impact on your enjoyment after the fact. Like, if I enjoy the first scene of a book, like, if I enjoy the first page or the first chapter, I'm going to be more invested immediately in the book. But if the book has one really incredible line right at the beginning, I'm still going to remember that line by the time I've made it to the end of the book.
Right.
And as an aftermath thing, that will affect me more.
Right. One of the things I'm surprised is, in the quotes, you don't have the opening line of Harry Potter in there.
I do not.
It's like,
I know.
It surprised me.
Crazy.
Because you're, like, a Harry Potter fanatic.
That's true.
Still.
That's very true. I do know it, though.
You do know it. That's why you didn't have to write it down.
I didn't have to write it down in the notes, because it sets the stage for the whole thing.
Right, exactly.
Which I think is good, because Harry Potter is very, even the books are very cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, you get the whole picture, and the first line of the book starts us off on that, because it paints a picture of the setting.
Right.
And the characters.
Which is, like, usually it's, like, opening lines are going to be, like, either super descriptive, or, like, really paint the picture, or they're going to be very vague, but, like, in context.
Yeah.
But, again, we can get into that later, because we have our other lines that we're going to have a whole section on, like, actual lines.
That's true.
The
first line of Harry Potter, if anyone is interested, because now we've talked about it. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much.
That's really good. It's just really good opening.
Yeah.
Because then everything goes downhill for them so fast.
Yeah. It spends, like, and that's an instance where, like, the first chapter is really good, because it sets up the normal lives that this couple has, you know, like this picturesque, perfect, nothing weird going on, and then it immediately transitions into everything being very weird.
Immediately, just all done. So it looks like the next bullet point on here is, how well do the most famous opening lines hold up?
This is a fun thing. I did some research, and now we're gonna quiz Alan.
Oh,
I've got a surprise quiz for Alan.
I'm so scared.
These are 5 of, and I was really surprised by the selection. I did some research this morning, and I looked up what are considered the most memorable opening lines of things. These are the one, and I looked at, I don't know, maybe like a couple dozen lists today. These are the ones that got the most attention across all the lists.
Oh,
so
boy.
I like tallied up the ones that were mentioned the most times.
Oh, I'm gonna look like a damn fool.
Are you ready for this?
No.
Because I was surprised by the 5 that won.
Okay. Here we go.
Like, okay.
What?
So, opening line, and you give me the name. These are all books. These are all famous literary opening lines.
Oh no! Now it's gonna be really bad.
You would not have gotten any of the movie ones.
Oh, no!
I got one of the movie ones.
Oh no, that's horrifying.
So we're just doing the books.
Okay, here we go. Let's do it.
It was a queer, sultry summer, the summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, and I didn't know what I was doing in New York.
I have no idea.
Yeah, that shocked me.
Which one is that?
That is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
Never even heard of it.
I've read The Bell Jar. It's a very good book. I did not know the first line when it came up. I was very surprised.
I can see how that would make an impression.
It's a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a good wife.
That's Gatsby? Is that Gatsby? No, that's not Gatsby. Pride and Prejudice?
That is Pride and Prejudice.
There we go. I just immediately thought Gatsby because I like Gatsby more.
Gatsby.
Oh, that's right. It's truth universally acknowledged. Duh. Of course, it's Jane Austen.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13.
No, no idea. Catcher in the Rye. That's my only.
Oh god, Catcher in the Rye was in. If I had done top 10 instead of top 5, Catcher in the Rye would have been on there. But it was like, because it also had a lot of hits, but it's like a paragraph long.
Oh,
that's if you want to know my story.
Oh, of course.
Then the first thing you gotta understand. Yeah.
No, I don't know.
That is 1984 by George Orwell.
Oh, I don't even read that one.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I haven't. I was thinking about Brave New World. Different one.
Oh.
That was definitely not.
Those are 2 different books.
Those are 2 very different books.
In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since.
No. Wait, To Kill a Mockingbird? No,
you know this one.
I do?
I'm 100% sure you know this one.
Oh no! Is it Brave New World?
It's The Great Gatsby.
God damn it! Fuck!
That cracked me up. And
Oh, wow.
our number one, and this was the number one most frequented on opening lines list.
Okay.
Call Me Ishmael.
Really?
Yeah, number one in the most memorable lines.
Oh, God. Oh, God, and I don't know it. I've heard it quoted so many times, but I have no idea what it is.
That's Moby Dick.
Oh, duh!
Melville.
Of course it's fucking Moby Dick.
And the reason why I did this pop quiz for Alan is because I really think that the opening lines that go down in history are maybe not the best lines.
Like, it was a dark and stormy night, which is what I expected to be on there.
Yeah.
Which is Three Musketeers, right? That's what the dark and stormy night is? I swear it is. Hold on. I'm gonna Google it really fast.
I'll believe you. Three Musketeers is like one of the big classics that I have not read.
I swear I only know this because it's like, well, it doesn't matter because my internet's not gonna load, so we're never gonna know. But yeah, no, I do not remember like any of them. I didn't know any of those. Even Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
I only got one for the book I did not read.
So, I think it's I think it's one of those things where
it's also not. It was not Three Musketeers. It's Paul Clifford.
Oh,
is the name of that book. Apparently.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, I did not know that either. Whoops.
But it's also, and I think this is one of those things where it's like opening lines are going to make a big impact individually, and the ones that are remembered collectively, I don't understand why these, Great Gatsby is arguably one of the better opening lines to a novel, so like that one I kind of understand being on the list, but the others, like even when I like the book, it's like I didn't quite and you'll notice To Kill a Mockingbird was barely on any of the things.
Really?
And I think that's an instance of the first line doesn't immediately grab your attention.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, even though the first chapter of To Kill a Mockingbird is exceptional, even though it's one of the, like, most renowned books, you know? Great American literature, but the first line just, like, isn't well remembered.
Right, it just isn't there like the rest of the book is.
Yeah.
Like, because as it turns out, a lot happens in that book.
Yeah.
Many, many things happen. Well, it's also, because the thing most people remember that is the speech. Because Atticus has his big speech.
Right.
Which is very good, as it turns out. The other one that isn't on there is it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Which I know is Charles Dickens. I know that's A Tale of Two Cities. I swear I know things.
That was another one. If we'd done top 10, that also would have been on there.
It was weird, because it's like, those are the ones that I, like, collectively remember.
There were a bunch that were tied with Great Gatsby. Out of the list I read, Great Gatsby got, like, 7, and there were, like, 4 other books that were also mentioned 7 times. I'm glad I took Great Gatsby, because it ended up definitely being the funniest. Yeah, it was the funniest, as it turns out, because I fucked up so badly. But yeah, that's one of those things, and I think even if, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like the Jane Austen quote that we had on there, I knew was a Jane Austen quote before I ever read Pride and Prejudice, which I've only finally just read recently.
It's like, because, well, it's like, it starts the exact same way that so many of those books do.
Yeah.
Like, so many of those time period books, like, you said it, and it was like, my first thought was the importance of being earnest, because I'm like, that's like the same story. I'm not gonna say it's the same story. But like, you know, it's the same time period, it's the same kind of stuff. Like, when I hear that kind of phrasing, that's the immediate kind of time period my brain goes to.
Yeah, and I think that's something to be said. I think that's one of the reasons why they are the most well-remembered lines, even though out of context, they're really not the best. But those are the ones, like, you hear the line and you can kind of get a picture for what the book is.
Right, it immediately comes up with an image.
Because, like, you immediately knew it was a period thing.
Right.
From the quote.
Right, that's just how it goes.
So.
Well, I look like a fool.
Oh, no.
So that's great. Didn't get fucking Moby Dick. God.
That's good. Oh, God.
I was just seeing Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Also.
Oh, yeah.
Which
The
I've also
musical
been...
Moby Dick.
Yeah, musical Moby Dick, of course.
And that kind of answers our other discussion point.
Which is how important is context?
How important is context, which I think is very important.
Yeah, I think it's very important.
Especially to the ones that have held up and are famous. The other one, I lied to you.
Oh, no, there's another one?
There's not another quote, but the top 5, there was one that actually had 8. That was above the 7, but I feel like they lied to me.
Oh, no!
So I didn't include that.
Which one was
it was the we were sleeping in what used to be a gym, which I know for a fact is just because that's the first line of A Handmaid's Tale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just because Handmaid's Tale is trending, because I've literally never seen it on any kind of list like this.
Of course not.
Handmaid's Tale
became like a show.
Like a trending thing. So it's like, I didn't include that one. But even, and that, because you said you looked like a fool. I felt like a fool, because it was on like 3 of the lists before I could remember that it was like the first line from A Handmaid's Tale.
It's like, huh. Would you look at that? So as it turns out, context is very important, because, God, you just look like a damn idiot. Whoops. Well, let's move on to something a little more fun.
Yeah, now that we're done looking like idiots.
Now that we're done with that, we're gonna move on to part 2, which is favorite opening lines.
Yes.
Ours.
So we're
turns out.
just gonna like go back and forth with some of the opening lines that have made an impression with us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're gonna start with books.
Books.
Here's I'm excited.
Yeah.
All my opening lines are.
Trolley.
Yeah.
Go.
It can hardly be a coincidence that no language on Earth has ever produced the expression "as pretty as an airport."
God.
That's the first line of Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul by Douglas Adams.
Oh, Douglas Adams.
Good. Oh, and that was one of the reasons I put this first is because this also ties in to the context thing that we were talking about.
Uh-huh.
Even though that's one of my favorite opening lines for a book, I think the introduction for Hitchhiker's Guide is better, but you have to have, like, the whole spiel in there.
Right, it was similar to, Good Omens, also, because it's like, it has that whole spiel, and then it just turns it on its head immediately. So funny. It's probably, like, the best, like, opening, like, 2 paragraphs to a book.
It's really good.
But it's not particularly an opening line.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's my first.
I'm gonna do my short one first, because my other one is, like, really long.
Okay.
To whom it may concern, it's been almost 24 years since I last heard from you. And that's from an indie book. That's from, Property of Scavenger, which I, like, picked up in, like, indie New York bookshop. And it's, like, really good. It's, like, a dystopian sci-fi thing, and it's just, like, it really sets the mood for it, just immediately. Like, I should go back and read it, as it turns out, because it's not that long. And it's really cool, because it's written on, like, it's, like, printed on, like, fax paper, so it's, like, someone received a fax of, like, this whole story. It's really cool. I like it a lot.
I'm good. Speaking of dystopias, sci-fi, my next opening line, it was a pleasure to burn, which is
Fahrenheit 451.
By Ray Bradbury.
Bradbury!
It was on the list. It was if we had done like top 25 or whatever, because it showed up on some of them. But it's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, it's good. It's a good book, as it turns out. The ending is not quite what I was expecting.
Ray Bradbury will definitely end a book in a way that you won't be expecting.
You're just like, where's the ending of this book? Where did it go? Hold on! This doesn't match the rest of the book at all. Bradbury, what are you doing? Yeah. That's about right. Do you want to do one more since I've got the fucking long one?
So my other science fiction one, which I don't know where I stand in the book being better or like comparing to Fahrenheit, but I will say, as an opening line, another one of my all-time favorites. All of this happened more or less, which is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five.
I love Kurt Vonnegut.
That's just such a good way to start any kind of story.
Just like, probably.
It's like by immediately second-guessing your narrator.
Yeah, it's just immediately like, oh, he's gonna be one of these narrators. It's very good.
Good.
As it turns out. So my second one is, I wonder if anyone's gonna guess what this is from. Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeped into the book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation? And that's, surprise, surprise, Alice in Wonderland! Oh, we got that! No, it's not. But yeah, I think that's just a very, like, it's the whole first paragraph, but it's all technically one line.
Yeah.
But I mean, that really sets you up for the whole Lewis Carroll style.
Yeah.
Of, like, run-on sentences and
it gets you into the scene.
Right, and you really get an understanding of Alice, like, immediately.
Yeah.
Just from that.
It's great characterization of your protagonist right off the bat.
And it's like, it also, you don't need to specify that she's a child, like, through it, because obviously she's a child. Like, that's very obviously a childish thought
Actually,
to have.
Alice is a 90-year-old woman.
Oh, you don't say! How'd she get down the rabbit hole?
I mean, that's why she has to fall so slowly, so she doesn't break her head.
Wow! Jesus Christ.
I'm full of fake facts today,
Yeah, you're just doing all sorts of fake facts.
Oh boy.
As it turns out.
Having too much fun with our fun podcast. I have one last opening line for books.
Mm-hmm.
Ignatius Martin Parrish spent the night drunk and doing terrible things.
God damn it, Egg. What are you doing?
That's Horns by Joe Hill. It's good.
You don't have any bias towards it whatsoever.
I don't have any. It's not like he's like my favorite writer.
Or anything.
Nothing like that. I do think it's really interesting because it does sort of, it's like a lot more lighthearted than I'd say the rest of the book is.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it kind of sets the tone because Ig never you never get to find out what the terrible thing he that he's done that sets the rest of the book into motion.
Mm-hmm.
And having just like a really vague opener like that is sort of like all the context that you need for the story.
Well, I mean, like, if he's so drunk that he's doing terrible things, he probably also doesn't remember. So,
Yeah.
like, you know, it's fine.
It's a really appropriate way to start a book when your protagonist has a hangover.
That's true. So yeah, those are our favorite book quotes. And then we have movies is the next category that we're going into.
So I have another fun,
Here we go.
dystopian. There was me, that is Alex, and my three droogs, that is Pete, Georgie, and Dim, and we sat in the Korova milk bar trying to make up our Roosadukes about what to do with the evening.
God.
Which obviously is Clockwork Orange, and it's something that I think the book did a little bit better of immediately showing you what the language is going to be like. But they couldn't really do that with a movie.
Right, because it's a movie.
Yeah.
It's not a text-based medium.
So they can't drop you in quite as entirely. But it still sets the tone, especially with like what the dialogue is going to be like. Mm-hmm. Well, which is why I had it on there.
It's like, it's the quick world building that you need to know that you're going to be confused for the rest of the movie. So I'm going to go with my short one first, which is, help, someone help me. And that's the opening line to Saw.
Yeah.
Is like,
nice.
Which is...
I was surprised to see that one on there.
I like it. It very immediately sets the whole thing up.
And it's weird, because it's like, it's such a generic phrase, but like, as I was reading it through in your notes, I heard it in Adam's voice.
Right?
Which is how I knew.
Can't you, like, it's so vague, but, like, you just know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think a lot of the opening of that movie does have a lot to do with the visuals of it.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, like, that's the thing where the context makes, like, a lot of the stuff, like, work. Because it's like, after you see those visuals, of course that's going to be what you say.
Yeah.
Like, of course.
And that's a good, because when you are working, this isn't really what the episode is about, but when you are working in a visual format or any kind of multi-sense format, it's, your opening line has to depend on the other aspects as much as is appropriate.
Right.
So
there has to be a balance for it.
Yes. The world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Which, for those of you who don't know, is the opening line to Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the Lord of the Rings movies in so long. Probably because it would take me less time to read the books than it would be to watch the movies. But I digress.
That's true. But yeah, I like that. Also, a lot of people, because they go into the whole spiel shortly after that about the rings. And like who gets what rings and what ring survives, and you know, that's the thing that most people remember as being the first thing in the movie.
But it's not.
No. It's Cate Blanchett just talking about how things are different.
Thanks, Kate. Which, I mean, like, that's important, because somebody fucked up. God damn it, Bilbo. Ain't that just the way?
That's just how it goes sometimes.
So my next one, this is actually like a song, but I'm just gonna say it out loud. It's, "Our glorious city was built by the divinities, by gods, who saw fit to bestow a paradise." And that is the opening lyrics to The Road to El Dorado, which is my favorite movie of all time.
Nice.
And it's accompanied with, like, really beautiful stylized visuals that, like, obviously, like, give all the context for what everything looks like. And because that whole first song is like the legend of El Dorado and like how it was made and everything, and it's gorgeous. And I love it. And like, I love that movie so much. But yeah, it's like really just like, it sets up a lot of what's going to happen on later in the movie, because we don't immediately get into it. Like, because we have to have, like, set up for the characters, I guess. But, like, it's like when we finally get to El Dorado, like, you really get to understand that whole opening thing. It's really good.
That's
I like
cool.
it.
I haven't seen that in a really long time.
I love it. It's my favorite. I've got it. We're gonna watch it now. Right now, we're stopping the podcast.
So... Speaking of songs, opening movie, "Out from the night, from the mist, steps a figure, no one really knows his name for sure," which is the opening line for Repo the Genetic Opera.
I knew it! I knew it was Repo! I knew it!
It's good. And that's another one where the visuals are really important, because all of the exposition for the movie is done in the form of comic pages.
Right.
That show up from the screen, except for we have like one song of exposition,
right,
which is how the movie opens.
It
and
has a lot of screaming.
Also very good.
It's very good.
You've got to get that gore in there really early so people know what they're getting into.
Yeah, because wow, does it just keep on coming, like consistently?
Because it's very bloody for an opera.
Whew. So my next one is a long one. Again, on the clearest of nights, when the winds of Ethereum were calm and peaceful, the great merchant ships and their cargo of Cernian Sura crystals felt safe and secure. Little did they suspect that they were being pursued by pirates, and the most feared of all these pirates was the notorious Captain Nathaniel Flint. And that is the opening to Treasure Planet, and it's like a little storybook that Jim is reading, and it's very good. Again, a lot of visual context for it, because it really sets up the sci-fi atmosphere of it, because we've got all these weird words in here. And so it really has it illustrated to help get in the context of it. Mm-hmm. And it's just really good. It's a very nice opening. It's very dramatic and cute at the same time.
Nice.
I like it. Trying to plan is another good movie, as it turns out. Very underrated.
I can even see that, yeah. And the, as for not maybe still a little underrated.
Maybe still.
But very famous movies.
Yeah.
So you thought you might like to go to the show, which is the first line in Pink Floyd's The Wall. And I chose that one because it's a very interesting way to open a film, but also because they tie back around to it later. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting because when most people hear so you thought you might like to go to the show, they actually hear the reprise mm-hmm. to it because it cycles back around.
Right.
And the reprise got a lot more airplay.
That's just how it goes sometimes.
But that's also how the movie opens, and it's good.
So they think they know the opening, but they actually don't.
Yeah.
Ooh. Spicy. Now we move on to television.
Yes.
And this one we don't have as many for because TV's a thing.
TV, with the serialized things, it's definitely more of a visual format, I'd mm-hmm. say. Even more than movies, probably.
That sounds about right. Because it's like, the thing is, with a TV show, you have to be able to hook someone in with every episode, mm-hmm. because your entire audience isn't going to be watching from the beginning. Like, people are going to come in halfway through.
Yeah.
That's just sort of how the cable television series works. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with my short one. Welcome. Everything is Fine. Which is the first thing that we get to see in The Good Place.
God, so good!
And it's not a line of dialogue, but it's written very blatantly on the wall across from the protagonist. So we're getting introduced to this environment at the same time that Eleanor is, which I think is one of the reasons why it's such an effective line.
Right.
Because we get to see it put there for Eleanor's sake, but then we also get the feeling of being calmed without knowing why.
Like, everything is fine. Why wouldn't it be fine? Now I'm...
Yeah, like, we don't know why it wouldn't be fine, like, but we know we're being consoled for something.
Like, oh no.
So it's like, it's very nice, but a little bit ominous, which is like the perfect way to start a show like The Good Place.
Oh, it's so good. Such a good show. NBC needs to keep its good shows. It keeps not doing that. So mine's a little bit different. It's not like the very first opening, like, it's not like a definitive opening line. It's an anime opening. And it's, wealth, fame, power. Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, attained this and all the rest the world had to offer. And that's the opening to the first opening of One Piece. And it's like, that's sort of how we go into every episode. Because they play the opening first before doing any episode stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, for the first however long that intro runs, I haven't gotten out of it yet. That's how they start every episode, and it really sets the mood for the whole thing. We get our pirates in there, we get our usual pirate things that they get, and we get context for what Luffy is trying to achieve, because like almost every episode he says he wants to be king of the pirates, because that's how serialized things work. So we immediately have context for what our character is going through, even just in that episode. So, I really like it. It's a good opening.
Nice.
Turns out, the song is sung by Vic Mignogna.
Oh! It's my new favorite opening.
It's very good, as it turns out.
And our last show one, my long one.
Your long
this
one.
This is like my longest opening thing. hey, it's Hannah Baker. That's right. Don't adjust your whatever device you're listening to this on. It's me, live and in stereo. No return engagements, no encore, and this time, absolutely no requests. Which is how we start off 13 Reasons Why. The second season of which is now available on Netflix. There's my timely...
There's your timely thing. Well, it's good, because I don't think we have really any more timely things on this list.
Yeah.
So...
This is our most timely thing. Unless you want to count that last year's season of The Good Place is almost on Netflix.
Almost! But it's not. As it turns out.
We're so good at the timely references.
We're real good at timely references, and timely references are boring.
They're really boring.
That's just facts. Wow, speaking of timely, look at that first quote on the other section.
Oh, yeah.
So this is our other section where we just put a lot of other things.
Yeah, it's just like an amalgamation of stuff. And do you want to go first?
Yes, because I have more this time. So the first one I have on here, the line is just, "What's my name?" And that is from the manga series Are You Alice? And the whole thing starts off as this guy just has total amnesia, and he shows up in this Wonderland type place, and they're just calling him Alice, and he's like, I guess that's who I am now. This is what we're gonna do, and then so it's really the whole theme of the series can be summed up in that one line, which is why I think it's so good. Because it's that's just a constant question that everyone is coming across, is if the name they have actually fits them as a person. It's very good.
Nice.
I need to maybe catch up on that. But
What?
Eh.
Catch up on stuff.
I know, right?
So I'm gonna do mine out of order.
Okay.
Crazy.
Do it.
So my first one is I Got No Regret Right Now, which is the opening line for my favorite album, Blink-182, self-titled.
What? No
Crazy.
way!
Yeah.
I never would have pictured that.
What? And I like it, because it's not... it was a single. It was from Feeling This. But it's very in the moment, which I think is a good summary of punk music as a whole. By the end of the album... Very angsty.
Very angsty.
There's a lot
much
of sad
regret.
Stuff. Lots of regrets. But
so much regret.
You know where you're starting it at, and then it turns into a wonderfully catchy song about sex.
Nice.
Good.
Yeah, that's also punk music, as it turns out.
Yeah.
It's a lot of sex, as it turns out.
We should all listen to more punk music. As a world. The world should listen
You
to
remember
more
this came out 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You might want to rephrase your suggestion. I don't know.
Hey, it's 10 years. It's 15 years. I can do math. Leave me alone. I forgot what year it was right now, actually.
Sometimes that's just how it is. So my next opening line is also a short one, as it turns out. And it was summer, I remember. And that's the opening line to Mouse, which is, everyone knows how I feel about Mouse. It's a great piece of literature that everyone should read. Prepare to be sad. But it's it's such a innocuous first line, to such a heavy story. And it's one of those things where I think the first scene really does give it context, because we get the immediate results of something bad happening.
Yeah.
To our main character, quote unquote. So it's I like it because it is so innocuous.
Especially because I don't think there's any way that you could pick up a copy of Mouse and not know it was a heavy story going into it.
I mean,
so starting off on a note that could go so many ways is...
Right. It's I can't imagine, looking at the cover of Mouse, which has, starving thin mice on the cover and a swastika, that you wouldn't be this is gonna be happy fun time. I can't imagine that.
I can't imagine a situation like that.
Doesn't happen.
Which, unfortunately, I've been trying to get my mother to read Mouse for several years now, and the cover is... too good at filling you in, because she absolutely will not touch it.
She's missing out.
I know, it's so good. She'd really like it. She thinks I'm always trying to trick her into reading World War II books. I did recently
do that.
But
this time it's not a trick. She knows.
Yeah, but she knows. But now she won't read it because she does know.
Oh, that's sad. Should read it. It's a cornerstone graphic novel. It's very important.
That's one of those things. If I were going to recommend one graphic novel to anybody, it would be Mouse.
Yes.
Regardless of who the person was.
Just consistently it's Mouse. Well, because the only people who are, like, going to have any opposition to it are, like, weird Nazis. So, like... And when I say weird Nazis, I mean all Nazis, because Jesus
There's no,
Christ,
like,
what's wrong with
Nazi.
Right. So, like, if you're not a Nazi, and if you are, stop listening to this right now. I don't want anything to do with you. But if you... Anyway, read Mouse. It's good. It'll make you sad, but you'll be glad you read it.
Yeah.
So, on a equally as happy note,
Yeah. Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate since I began to live. Which is the opening line for the video game, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Good.
You've been playing that a lot recently, as it
I
turns out.
find it took me a ridiculous amount of time to get to the good ends.
Oh, there is good ends.
There are good ends. They're just way harder to find than the bad ends.
Because they're,
Yeah, I've started replaying I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream in, like, January, and it's not the only game that I've been playing. It hasn't been, like, I've avidly been searching for the good end for the last 5 months and failing, but it's, like, in and around stuff, I have been trying to find the good ends, and it took me a long time.
A long time.
They're interesting, though, so if... Timely reference.
Nice timely reference to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Those of you who are trying to figure out the recent AAA title, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. It's worth it.
It's worth it?
It's worth finding the good ends also. I'm glad to be done with it, because it was driving me crazy.
Well, now you are.
But yeah.
Now you have to find some other fucked up game to play.
Yeah.
It won't take you very long.
It won't take me very long.
It's time to play Baldi's Basics.
Yeah.
In education and learning.
Nice.
Have you looked into it yet?
I have not. I wanted to wrap up I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
I mean, that's fair.
Which I just did. So that is actually, like, the next game on my list.
That's what we're doing after this.
Ooh.
So my next quote, is, she woke up and there was a glow. And that's the opening line to Seconds by Brian O'Malley, who is more well known for the Scott Pilgrim series.
Yes.
And it's like, it's very spooky. It's a nice spooky opening line. Because, like, everything goes downhill really fast. As it turns out, like, we sort of have a plateau of bad things, and then everything just sort of starts wibble-wobbling very badly. It's a very good book. I think it, like, obviously didn't get as much attention as Scott Pilgrim did, because Scott Pilgrim got a movie. Yeah. So we've got to re-highlight on that.
And a game.
And a game.
Crazy.
Which, something happened to that.
Yeah.
But, no, it just sort of disappeared. But it's just a very good book. And again, it's like, I really like these vague opening lines, as it turns out, because it's like, it just sets more of a mood than gives me a definitive thing, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, that's sort of where my thing is. Except for Alice in Wonderland. I'm good with that one.
There's something good to be said about a vague line.
Right?
It's intriguing.
Exactly. Which is very good.
It's a good way to hook people.
Yes. I like vagueness.
So here's my last opening quote for Miscellaneous. A friendly desert community where the sun is hot, the moon is beautiful, and mysterious lights pass overhead while we all pretend to sleep.
The moon. The moon. I love Night Vale so much. I never caught up with it after, like, the second season.
Yeah.
But I still have a great fondness in my heart for Night Vale.
It's good. And then, it's a good opening line, because pulls you in.
You're very confused immediately.
You're never gonna not be confused. So that's the right way to start things.
Right, it really gives you a nice surreal atmosphere starting off with.
Yeah.
Which was great.
And I chose that one because it's the start of the entire show, but I think Night Vale consistently has great opening lines for individual episodes also. There were, like, a few others that I thought about taking instead, just because the quotes are so good.
Oh, they're so good. They're also so funny.
But
a
that's
lot
the
of the
one
time,
that starts it. It's the one that starts the whole thing.
It's the beginning of the end, as it turns out, because everything just goes downhill.
I also had thought about, because the Welcome to Night Vale book also has a really good opening line, but that's one of those, like, contextual where you almost have to read, like, the full page.
Right. It's a good omens of itself.
Yeah.
So I have two more here.
Nice.
I'm gonna do the longer one first, because we can talk about the second one, because you know the second one.
Yes.
So the one I have is, they're the perfect loving family, so adoring, and I love them every day of every week. And that's the opening line to Next to Normal, which is a rock opera about a really fucked up family, as it turns out. They're not the perfect loving family. Spoiler alert. Yeah, I know, right? But it sort of brings you immediately into this dysfunctional atmosphere and, like, how the mother, like, does feel about, like, her entire family. Like, because she does love them, but they're extremely dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, she has, like, a lot of, like, she has, like, schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and, like, all these sort of, like, she takes, like, a lot of medications to keep it in order, and then it's, like, her husband is, like, not good at, like, supporting her through it. Like, he tries really hard, but it's, like, sometimes he snaps, and then, like, spoilers, I guess, she sees her son, but he's a hallucination because he died when he was a baby.
Ooh.
He died when she was, like, 6 weeks old, and then the daughter is, like, super depressed and anxious and feels like she's a replacement for the brother who died when he was 6 weeks old, and so it's very dysfunctional, but it's great. It's a great rock opera. I really enjoy it. It makes me sad every time I listen to it, but it has a sort of happy ending. Sort of.
Nice.
It's good. I like it a lot.
We should listen more of rock opera.
We should. We should see if it's recorded. It's so good. I was considering putting the opening line of Rent on here also, which is another great rock opera, but I think that one is a little stronger. Because it's, like, the one from Rent is a lot longer. But it's good. It's also very good. Watch rock operas. They're good.
Yes.
And so the last quote I have on here is, same old thing, day after day. What a bore. And that's the opening line to the Death Note manga, as it turns out. Which is, whoof. Whoof. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It very quickly becomes not the same old thing. Everything is bad again. A lot of these things go from, like, everything's fine to bad. That's sort of how stories work sometimes.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out, like, where even to jump in with the Death Note. That's a very misleading thing. Not boring.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, because it very much captures the mood that you're supposed to have when you start the manga.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it would be, because it just changes so drastically, so fast, and it keeps changing drastically all the way through.
Right, everything that happens is a big thing that happens. I think it's one of those things where it also really showcases, like, the difference in perspectives, because it's Ryu is the one who says that, who is the Shinigami, and so, like, you can see his different perspective on human activities versus humans' perspective on human activities, which we would not particularly define as boring.
Yeah.
when just bad shit's happening all the time. Little bit different.
A little bit.
But yeah, that's another one that just really immediately is like, this is what you're getting into. You're not ready for it. So yeah.
Are you ready to move on to part 3?
I am. Let's do it.
Right. So part 3 is our advice on writing great opening lines. And my advice, this comes down to like a lot of writers will tell you this. Don't worry about the opening line when you start. Like, just start. It's more important that you get stuff going. Any advice that I have after this will be more about revising and reshaping and contributing to your opening line after your first draft is done. Because I'm a big believer in not editing during a rough draft. Like, get the story out there and done. Start writing, and that's the best way to... Because basically what it comes down to is that your opening line is going to be the first line of many lines.
Right.
And they're all going to make that first line more important as you go. So.
And it's one of those things where it's also like, it depends on how you write also, because it's like, for me in particular, like, when I'm writing something, I don't always know how it's gonna go. Like, I usually just sort of fluctuate and write down what comes to mind. Like, I don't do outlines ever. But, so, just because, like, even if you come up with a great opening line when you start, you don't always know how the story is gonna be when it ends. Yeah. So it's like, you shouldn't get hooked on writing a story around your first line. You should write the story and then go back to the first line. And
that's something, like, because sometimes you'll have an idea for something that would make a really cool or really interesting first line, and you come up with a story around that. And it can be a really good writing exercise, it can be a really good prompt, it can be a really good starting point, but if you get too focused on keeping that as your first line, you'll be, like, you won't be as free to do stuff, and I feel like it can definitely hold you back in the creative process.
Right, it's not gonna feel, you're gonna feel more obligated to stuff, which shouldn't be how it is when you're exercising your creative chops. You should just sort of go for it. I think also an important thing is also not to neglect your closing line, also.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you get so focused on your opening line and don't... The opening is just as important as the closing. But that being said, the closing should match your opening.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't need to match, but I mean, like, you should end on as strong a note as you started on.
That's very true.
Because I feel like a lot of books just sort of stop. Like, they don't, like, conclude. And it's sort of like, some books that works, some books it does not work for. Like, I remember the ending of The Giver, that's what it is.
Oh.
And I just feel like that book just really just ends. Like, it doesn't conclude. And I really feel like it should have concluded.
Whereas you have stories like The Handmaid's Tale would be like the exact opposite of that, because it's being told, it's a perspective piece from Offred's point of view. And when her story just stops, it's because that's how personal narratives work.
Right.
Like, they go up to a certain point, and then you don't get to find out what happens after.
Right.
And it's like, Handmaid's Tale, the way that it was told, it was very frustrating to get to the end, because as the reader, we're used to having things tied up for us. Except for, like, some books, like The Giver.
Not like The Giver.
But we are used to having things tied up, but that's not how life works. So it was, like, a very good illustration of that.
I think one of the things that I like most about comics, about it, is because they have that visual aid to help them along, and that's why I feel like comics end a lot stronger a lot of the times, because it's like, it starts you, like, you go on this journey, and it's like, you get the additional illustrations with it, so even if, like, there's no closing line or whatever, there's a closing visual that maybe doesn't tie up all knots, but you get that definitive end to it. Which I like.
That's good.
I would go grab Mouse, but it's in the other room. Because I can't... I feel like it ends on the tombstone, as I recall.
I think so.
which is like, that's how it ends,
And
oh.
And spoiler warning for Owen Meany, kind of. Kind of?
Kind of?
Because they tell you really early on that Owen doesn't make it to the end of the thing.
Right.
But the beginning kind of starts with, I don't know the exact opening line, or the exact closing line, but it starts with the narrator looking back and having fond memories of his best friend, Owen Meany, and it goes through, and we get to hear the whole story, like, told on different, like, what the narrator is going through now and what he went through with Owen, and it's told on, like, different timelines, and then the closing line ties back into it, because after the story just ends, you find out he's still praying for Owen Meany, which was the introduction that we got, and it's like, I didn't really realize how powerful the opening was until I had made it to the end of the book.
Right, I think closings that echo the openings are the best. I like those the most.
That's something I definitely like. I think it was done really well in Owen Meany, which is why I use that as an example, because it's like a 500-page book, and you still feel that resonance when you make it to the end. It's something that I do really appreciate in short fiction, though, is like when the last line echoes your first line. A really good example of that, strangely enough, is both my parents were surgeons and I used to talk to furniture.
Oh, nice. I thought you were going to say misery.
It's misery, because you're like, ooh. You get to the end of the book and that's the sound you make.
Oh!
No. No, I had to get my Reddit no sleep in here.
You did have to get your Reddit no sleep in here.
Because, like, that's how it's not the first line, but it's, like, the title. It's the...
Right.
What you go into knowing about the story, and you're like, what does that even mean? And then you make it to the end, and you're like, oh, God!
They're like, oh, why are the limbs all over the house?
So...
That's bad.
It's something that I think is really effective and much easier to pull off in short fiction. It's something you see in a lot of, like, creepypastas. No sleep posts.
Good.
Good night.
Unless you're Max, in which case you don't, like, sometimes you do it, and other times, like, everything just happens.
Yeah.
Like, a lot, really fast. God. I love him. I worry about him so much.
Yeah. I can't think of another writer where I just spend so much of my personal life worrying about them because of their content.
Just like, you good, dude? Oh.
The answer is no. It has to be no.
It has to be no. Where are we on this bullet point list?
So, our main thing, we're still on the first one. You've got to start the story before you know how best to frame it.
Right.
I guess. But if you are looking to really hone in on your opening line, we do have a little bit of advice on how to do that. Right. In that, like, we've looked at some of our favorite opening lines throughout the episode. The things that really stuck out for me are that the phrasing is memorable. It grabs the reader's attention, and it captures the tone of the project. Because those are, like, the three aspects that carry over throughout opening lines.
Right. It's that...
Both the ones that were, like, most impactful to me personally, and the ones that are remembered widely.
Right. Like, the Jane Austen one, like, has a very particular feel to it. The Alice in Wonderland has a very definite style to it.
Yeah.
And it's, like... Even some of the, like, our more modern ones, they do have a more modern feel to their, whole shtick.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
So those are, like, those are the three... I don't know if you have other things to toss in there.
No, that sounds about right.
But those are, like, the three main things that you want to look for when you are honing in an opening line. It doesn't have to give the reader the story right away, but it should give them a feel for what they're getting into.
Right. They should have an idea of... It's, like, similar to, like... There's, like, the don't judge a book by its cover, but your cover should portray what the reader is going to be getting into.
Right.
even if it doesn't do it, like, explicitly, like, the color palette, the mood, the imagery, it should relate to what is in your book. And that's how your first line should be, also. It doesn't have to be anything explicit, but it should be a preview of what the rest of the book is going to be like.
Yeah. And it should be, if at all possible, it should be, it should grab enough attention that the reader will be invested enough to read the first scene, because the first scene is where you really sell their story.
That's where you do, like, it's like the first song on an album, the first song in a musical, the first scene of a book. The first anything is your chance to convince the reader that they want to be here.
Yeah.
Because they can just close it if they don't like it and put it back, and that's it.
And you don't have to put all of that pressure on the opening line, but it should be strong enough just to carry into that.
Right, it's like...
Or
ooh!
Do that also, I guess.
Stephen King!
I guess I should talk about this, because it was also on a few of the lists. I picked on Stephen King a lot in this episode for the first line of Misery, but he also does have one of, like, the strongest opening lines in, I'd say, like, more modern speculative fiction. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
Yeah, that's really good.
Very strong opener.
As it turns out.
So he can do it, it's just... That's like... Misery's like one of my all-time favorite novels, and... it doesn't start off the best.
An example of a book that is still good even though the first scene did not sell you.
Yeah.
Completely. Sometimes that's how it is.
And I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's about...
Do you have other...
Nope. I got nothing.
Do you have a good closing line?
Woo. That's it. That's all I got.
Cool!
Hey, this has been Unsolicited Advice. I'm Bubblegum.
I'm Toxic.
And we'll see you next time. Woo.